Here are 8 gruesome examples of human experimentation conducted by Japan's Unit 731 facility during World War II and the Second Sino-Japanese War. Number 8. Dismemberment. Unit 731 was a secret chemical and biological warfare research unit that operated by the Japanese Imperial Army at the time of the Second Sino-Japanese War between 1937 and 1945. Its official title had initially been the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army, but in 1941, the facility started working under the name Unit 731, commanded by General Shiro Ishii. It was located in the Chinese city of Harbin in the Pingfang district. During its relatively brief existence, the facility was responsible for chilling instances of human experimentation, which was often performed on living subjects. It is estimated by some historians that approximately 250,000 people had been involved in the gruesome experiments. Unit 731 is considered to have been guilty of the most notorious war crimes ever performed by the Japanese. The atrocities that took place in the facility are comparable to those that happened in Nazi concentration camps such as Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, and others. The human beings that were used as test subjects were referred to by the codename Maruta. This was a euphemistic construction which meant logs, and it was used in various contexts, such as how many logs fell. The term arose from a joke among the facility staff. The joke was connected to the fact that local authorities had been told the facility was operating as a lumber mill. The test subjects included the elderly, children, and pregnant women. Due to the fact that Unit 731 operated at a time when the Republic of China and the Empire of Japan were at war, more than 70% of the victims were Chinese. It is estimated that 30% were Russian. Other victims included Allied prisoners of war, Pacific Islanders, and Southeast Asians. When World War II ended and the facility ceased its operations, the researchers who were captured by the United States were secretly given immunity so that the United States government may benefit from the information they had uncovered through human experimentation. Among those who had negotiated their immunity was also General Shiro Ishii, who had never been tried for any of his war crimes. The Americans were mainly preoccupied with the research concerning biological and chemical warfare, which they wanted to incorporate into their own bioweapons program. Unit 731 staff members who had been captured by the Soviets were tried in 1949 at the Khabarovsk war crime trials. The West widely ignored or dismissed victim accounts as communist propaganda. Much like the Nazis, the researchers and doctors from Unit 731 were also preoccupied with testing the limits of the human body. They attempted to find out the amount of damage soldiers could take on the battlefield and still survive. They performed experiments involving dismemberments on Allied prisoners of war, as well as on Russian and Chinese civilians. In order for researchers to monitor the level of blood loss, the dismemberments often included the limbs. The main purpose was for the knowledge gathered from these experiments to be applied in combat situations. However, there were also other experiments that were not battle-related. These involved reattaching the severed limbs to other parts of the body or freezing them and removing them from the body until nothing but the head and torso of the victim remained. Because the researchers wanted their data to be as accurate as possible, they feared that injecting the test subjects with anesthesia would negatively influence the outcome of their experiments. That is why many of the victims had to go through the excruciating pain of having their limbs forcefully separated from their bodies while being fully awake. Number 7. Experimental chambers. Unit 731 stretched across 2.3 square miles, and it was made up of over 150 buildings. While some experiments were carried out in the field, others took place in specialized chambers. Some of these chambers featured centrifuges in which the victims were spun until they died in order to determine the levels of force that would be fatal for human beings. Other captives were placed in high-pressure chambers until their bodies gave in and their eyes were protruding out of their orbits. Some subjects were treated with fatal doses of X-rays, while others were injected with seawater or animal blood, burned, or buried alive. Unit 731 researchers and other staff members would deliberately deprive prisoners of food or water to monitor how long it would take them to die. Number 6. Biological warfare. Unit 731 featured 8 divisions. Division 1 was tasked with research on typhoid, anthrax, the bubonic plague, cholera, and tuberculosis. The tests involved numerous live human subjects, regardless of age or gender. For the specific purpose of human testing, a prison was built which had the capacity of holding between 300 and 400 people. Division 2 was responsible for biological weapons research and how they were to be used in the field, with a focus on manufacturing devices which would be able to spread parasites and germs. The facility had 4,500 containers which were used for the raising of fleas with the purpose of spreading various diseases, 6 cauldrons used for the production of different chemicals, and an additional 1,800 containers which were used to produce biological agents. The facility was able to produce around 66 pounds of bubonic plague bacteria on a daily basis. Prisoners were infected with various diseases, including the plague, botulism, smallpox, and cholera. A consequence of the research was the invention of the flea bomb, which could spread the bubonic plague, and the defoliation bacilli bomb. In 1938, General Shiro Ishii proposed a bomb design involving porcelain shells, which enabled Japanese troops to launch a series of biological attacks against the Chinese. Deadly pathogens such as fleas carrying the plague, anthrax, typhoid, and others were used to infect wells, reservoirs, and agricultural areas. Airplanes dropped infected clothing and food supplies in areas of China that were not under Japanese occupation. Even before the Battle of Chengdu, which took place in 1943, proof was found that the Japanese had used plague-based biological weapons to contaminate the area as early as 1941. Historians differ on how many lives were lost due to the biological weapon attacks. According to the International Symposium on the Crimes of Bacteriological Warfare, held at Chengdu in 2002, the number is thought to be over 580,000 people. Some historians place it at 200,000 people. These atrocities would not have been possible without the experiments carried out by Unit 731, which the Japanese government has still not taken responsibility for. Number 5. Vivisection. Thousands of men, women, and children who tragically became part of Unit 731's dark history of human experimentation were subjected to vivisections, which were often performed without anesthesia. Many of them lost their lives as a result of the horrifying experiments. The procedure involved injecting one of the prisoners with a certain disease, after which the vivisection was performed in order to study the effects the disease had on their body. Invasive surgery was performed on the test subjects, and it involved removing different organs or parts of organs so that the researchers might observe how they had been affected by the disease. Unit 731 staff members were worried that decomposition would affect the results of their experiments, and that is why the vivisections were performed while the victims were still alive. It was not uncommon for multiple surgeries to be performed on the same subject. Other experiments involving vivisections included procedures which were even more disturbing, such as complete removal of a victim's stomach or reattaching the esophagus to the intestines. According to testimonies gathered from Unit 731 surgeons, some prisoners had parts of their lungs, liver, or brain removed. Ken Yuasa, a Japanese Army surgeon, suggested that vivisections were not only restricted to Unit 731 and estimated that more than 1,000 Japanese personnel had practiced them in mainland China as well. The files detailing the manner in which the procedures were carried out are still available online. Number 4. Venereal diseases. Unit 731 doctors and researchers studied the effects that venereal diseases had on the human body. Although this initially involved injecting the victims with the disease, the doctors eventually decided to force non-infected and infected prisoners to have sex with each other. This was done so that they might observe the disease throughout its stages, starting from its transmission. In his testimony, one of the guards from Unit 731 described the method that was used for the transmission of syphilis between prisoners. Infection of venereal disease by injection was abandoned, and the researchers started forcing the prisoners into sexual acts with each other. 4 or 5 unit members, dressed in white laboratory clothing that completely covered the body with only the eyes and mouth visible, handled the tests. A male and female, one infected with syphilis, would be brought together in a cell and forced into sex with each other. It was made clear that anyone resisting would be shot. In order to study the way in which the disease progressed, vivisections were performed on the victims cells at various stages of the infection. This was done so that both external and internal organs could be monitored as the venereal disease progressed. Even though the female prisoners had been forcibly infected and the guards were aware of this reality, testimonies from several guards blamed them for being syphilis hosts. The guards from Unit 731 referred to the genitals of infected women as jam-filled buns. Children were born and grew up within the confines of Unit 731. They were also infected with syphilis and tested in the same manner as older patients. The aim was for doctors to determine the efficiency of particular treatments over longer infected periods. A testimony from a member of the Youth Corps that underwent training at Unit 731 described a Russian woman with a young daughter aged 5 or 6, a Chinese woman with an infant, and another Russian woman with a boy 6 or 7 years of age as they awaited their syphilis testing. He mentioned that the children underwent similar tests to those that their parents went through. Number 3. Frostbite experiments. Some of the experiments that took place at Unit 731 monitored how the human body behaved under extreme temperatures. One of them involved frostbite testing. The captives were taken outside, where their appendages were intermittently dipped in water until frostbite started to form into the target areas. According to testimonies, they determined whether an appendage was frozen by striking it with a short stick. If the body part was frozen, it reportedly made the same sound as if the stick was hitting a wooden board. Once the ice was removed from the area, it was doused with water of varying temperatures, and the effects were monitored. Number 2. Weapon testing. Even before Unit 731, the Japanese Imperial Army had a protocol which involved using captured Chinese soldiers for bayonet practice. An infamous photograph of a Japanese soldier with an infant impaled on his bayonet was taken during the Nanjing Massacre, which, along with Unit 731, represents some of the most horrific war crimes and crimes against humanity ever performed by the Japanese. Another common practice at Unit 731 was for the military personnel to test various weapons on the prisoners. They were tied to wooden posts and then used as target practice. Grenades were detonated at various distances in order to determine their explosive radius. Human beings were also subjected to flamethrower tests. Aside from the bombs carrying explosives, chemical weapons and germ-releasing bombs were also used on the prisoners that were tied to the wooden stakes. Number 1. Rape and forced pregnancy. Women were often forcibly impregnated so that experiments could be performed on them. One of the main objectives was to study the hypothesis of vertical transmission, meaning from mother to fetus, of certain diseases with a focus on syphilis. The main objects of interest were survival of the fetus and how the mother's reproductive organs were damaged. There is no clear account of how many babies were born at Unit 731. It is suspected that they were killed as soon as their experimental purpose was served. Women were subjected to physiological or bacteriological experiments, sex experiments, and many were victims of sexual assault and sex crimes. Although some of the sexual abuse took place under the pretense of scientific research, rape was a common occurrence at Unit 731, and both Japanese soldiers and researchers were guilty of it. One former guard related a chilling story in his testimony. He described how one of the researchers casually took the keys which opened one of the cells holding a Chinese woman. He opened the cell and raped her. Another researcher wanted to rape a woman who had participated in a frostbite experiment. Several of her fingers were missing, gangrene had set in, and her bones were black. According to the guard, he was about to rape her anyway. Then he saw that her sex organ was festering, with pus oozing to the surface. He gave up the idea, left and locked the door, then later went on to his experimental work.
Many cases have also been brought against Catholic higher-ups who have been deliberately covering up sexual abuse cases by denying accusations by victims and moving pedophile priests away to parishes in smaller districts where the abuse would sometimes still continue.